Hey everybody, what's up? It's been a while since I've uploaded a YouTube video, but I was at MGC, or Midwest Gaming Classic, a few weeks ago, and if you've never heard of what that is, it's a gaming convention that takes place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yeah, just a lot of cool stuff. It's a really fun convention. It's one of the biggest in the country, so if you live in a reasonable distance from there and you can get there, highly recommend going. It's very, very, very fun. But I basically saved up as much money as I could over the last year, essentially just saving up to be able to go here and splurge it all on a bunch of cool games that I've wanted. So yeah, it's over. I bought all the games. I've spent a few weeks playing all of them so that I know I'm not just, talking out of my butt when I talk about them. So that's why it's been a little bit, but I guess let's get started. I'll probably do it by console. Let's start with Nintendo consoles. And the first thing I will start with are the Super Nintendo games. We'll start off with this game called Populous that I bought on the Super Nintendo. I don't have a lot to say about it, to be honest. I played it for a little bit and I couldn't really figure out how to play it, but it's a God game. It was like a groundbreaking God game. It was one of the first big ones that got popular. Yeah, but you have like your little followers that worship you as their god and you can guide them to different things. I couldn't really figure out the controls. I'm going to give it another shot at some point, but my Super Nintendo is actually a little bit, the audio in it's a little bit messed up right now, so I'll play it once I get that fixed, because I want to get, I want the best experience possible when I'm playing a game like this, and I also will probably need to look up a tutorial, because it is kind of complicated. I'm not really super sure how it works. I like God games. God games are fun. The Universum is a really fun game. I made a video about that a little bit ago. Yeah, let me know. What God games should I try out? There's a few to me that have been pretty fun, I've been interested in. It's definitely a genre that I'm interested in, want to check out more. So yeah, let me know if there are any God games that you like, and I'm curious what you guys think of Populous here. Yeah, it's probably the one game that I really didn't look into, that I didn't play that much as compared to the other ones, I suppose. The next game on the Super Nintendo that I have is the original Sid Meier's Civilization. Now, I am a big Civilization fan. Civ 5, Civ 6, Civ 4 even a little bit. I played a lot when I was a bit younger. Yeah, it's just really cool to have the very, very first one. And honestly, it was a good time. Obviously, there's not as many features and it's a little bit more simplistic compared to the ones that I'm used to. It is the first one after all, and the graphics, of course, are dated and blah, blah, blah. But, it's still got that Civ charm that I really like. Just wanting to do one more turn, just expanding your empire a little bit more. Every turn, you just do, like, a couple things, so it's very, like, hard to be like, oh, this is the point that I put the game down, because if I just do one more turn, I can just do a couple more things and make my empire just a little bit stronger every single turn. It's just such an addictive formula, and they, even back in the first game that they made, they still really captured that feeling and that addictiveness. But yeah, I had fun with it. I kind of expected to play it and be like, this is boring, I'm used to Civ 5, and obviously, the older ones aren't as good, and they've updated it so much, blah, blah, blah. But I was playing it, and I was having fun. I actually want to start a new game. I think the only problem is there isn't really a way to save your progress in the Super Nintendo version of this game, so you just gotta keep your Super Nintendo on. I'm not a huge fan of that, but not that I'm aware of anyway. There wasn't a save function that I saw. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you just have to leave your Super Nintendo on whenever you start a game of this until you finish. And Civ games go on for hours and hours and hours, so it's kind of tricky. But I guess that is kind of the case with a lot of games that came out back in this time without hard drives or memory cards or any of that. But yeah, Civilization. I love the series. If you haven't played it, it's worth giving a try. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely for me. I have well over 1,000 hours in Civ 5 and hundreds in Civ 6, and yeah, it's just a really good series. Even the first one's really good. So moving on, let's go to the next Nintendo console, which would be the N64. And I got one game on the N64. It's called Mace: The Dark Age. It's kind of like Nintendo's Soul Calibur a little bit. It's like a fighting game, like Super Smash Bros. or a Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, one of those. Except you're using like medieval weapons, daggers, knives, swords, spears, all those things. And it was pretty fun. I was playing as the guy who's on the cover art, because I always play as the knight with the long sword in these types of games. Yeah, it's just a pretty solid fighting game. I don't really have a ton to say about it. The difficulty does get pretty hard as you go further into the game, but I feel like this game would be really fun with friends. I'm gonna have to try it out. Gosh, I wish I had more to say about it. It is a really fun game. I had a lot of fun with it. I actually had never heard of this game before. This wasn't on my list. This is one of the games I didn't have on my list. When I went to MGC, I saw it sitting there and I was like, what? This was, I've never heard of this. It looks really cool. I really like medieval themed games and stuff, and I like good combat systems, so this is like right up my alley. I played it and it's fun. I'm surprised I've never heard of this one before. It's a good one, and I would highly recommend it. So yeah, check this one out if it's not on your radar. It's pretty fun. So the next Nintendo system is the Nintendo GameCube, and I got 2 games for the GameCube. We'll start firstly with F-Zero GX. This is actually the newest F-Zero game they've made. I was telling my friend the other day that, unfortunately, F-Zero GX is actually the last F-Zero game they ever made. Like, they haven't made any since, and F-Zero is such a good series, it's so fun. And he said, that's not the way you should be thinking. You should be saying it's the newest F-Zero game they've made. And, the game is, let me look on the back here, 2003. Yeah, so it's 2024 right now, so it's been 21 years since they've released the last F-Zero game. But I still got my hopes up. Maybe on the Switch, or maybe the next Nintendo console, they'll release another F-Zero, but as far as I'm aware, this is the last one we have. And F-Zero is such a fun series. If you haven't played it, it's just a really, really fast racing game. The cars are really more like hovercraft, and it's just, there's like tons of racers. I think there's 30 racers per race. You basically have this little meter that if it runs out, you lose the race and your car explodes. And you can use up that meter either by like hitting other cars or hitting walls and taking damage, or you can use it up by using your boost. So, you got to balance, like, with the fast speeds that you're going, it's really hard to not hit the wall. Like, it's pretty challenging to not take damage that way. And then you also need to use your boost too in order to, win the race, because everybody else is using their boost. So you gotta there's like a whole balancing act where you're trying to make sure that bar doesn't like go all the way down and you lose. And you have to like kind of balance it in that way. You can recharge it. There's different like little recharging strips that you can drive on in the race. Yeah, it's just really fun. I love the really high speeds. It's like really stimulating and really fun compared to other racing games that are a bit, slower in comparison. But yeah, it's just a really, really fun, like stimulating racing game, and they really need to bring it back. It's just I have a lot of fun with it. It's one of my favorite racing games there is the F-Zero series, and this is the newest and best one in my opinion. So yeah, definitely check this one out. If people usually know Captain Falcon from Super Smash Bros, and then they don't know where he's originally from. Yeah, his games are definitely worth checking out, because I absolutely love F-Zero. And if you like games like Mario Kart or other arcadey racers, this is perfect for you. It's very, very, very fun. Moving on to the next or last GameCube game I got. It is Baton Kaitos. Gosh, this game is so cool, so unique. The art style reminds me a lot of, I know this is weird, but Silver for the Sega Dreamcast. I know it's probably a reference that nobody gets, but all of the stages that you walk on are already like pre-made, pre-rendered. It looks really pretty. It almost looks, I don't want to say photorealistic, but it looks, gosh, I wish I could describe this better. You could probably see what I'm talking about when you look at the video. Yeah, it's a very unique, like old school RPG type of style. A lot of games nowadays, you have like free roam with your camera, and you can kind of look at all different objects from different angles. But in a game like this, like the camera's in one spot, and it doesn't really move a ton. The scene that they put there for that area is artistically done and done very well, and I kind of like the way they do it because there isn't really room for like a lot of ugliness in these types of games. Yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling. I don't know if I have like a super good point here, but it's got an interesting art style. It's a little bit more anime than the game Silver. The characters are more anime style, but the coolest thing about this game is the combat system, and I absolutely like, this is one of my favorite combat systems I've seen in a game, to be honest. It's card based, and so, well, firstly, this is a JRPG, so yeah, it plays like that. You know, you see enemies in the open world, you walk up to them. It's like kind of a semi-turn-based, semi-action-based combat system when you get into the fighting stage. And the way it works is your party has an attack phase, and this is all based on speed. So, you know, there's an attack phase, and then when the enemy is attacking you, you have a defense stage. During each stage, you have like this deck, and you can like customize the deck, whatever. And there's different there's different like upgrades you can get for how much out of the deck you draw and all that. But each phase you draw some cards out of the deck. When you're going to attack, you select the cards that you're going to use for your attack, like whether that's a short sword or a dagger or a long sword, and what you're going to use to attack the enemy. Or you can use like healing items that you can draw from the deck at this point too. And then when the enemy goes to attack you on your defense phase, you also select those cards, but it's time based. So you can't sit there deciding forever like what card you're going to select. The enemy has, you know, within a few seconds, the enemy is going to hit you. So you have to select what card you're going to use to defend from the attack in time before it hits you. That's why it's like semi-turn based, semi-action is what I mean by that. You know, you can use like certain swords as defensive and offensive, so you can use them to attack and defend. Usually these types of weapons are not very good at either, but then there's certain cards that are good at one or the other. Some cards that are only for defense, like shields and stuff, and some cards that are only for offense. And these cards are usually way better at either blocking damage or dealing damage. But the problem with loading your deck up with these is that, like, you know, during your attack phase, if you only draw shields in your hand, then obviously you just can't attack that turn, so it kind of sucks. So it's like there's a lot of good like strategy and thinking about it, where it's like, okay, what should my deck be made up of? Should it be like all attacking cards, then I just can't ever defend, or should it all be like the mixed cards where I can always attack and defend every single turn? Obviously, I don't think it would be possible to do all defensive cards. I don't think that would even work, unless you have like Thorn's armor or something. Maybe that is possible, I don't know. Or, you know, what ratio of attack to defense cards should I have? How many healing items should I have? Like, the deck building is really, really good. It works really, really well. You know, it's like two different themes that you'd think wouldn't like fit together. Yeah, it blends perfectly, and the combat system is one of the most fun I've played in a long time. Yeah, it's very, very good. The enemies are also really cool. All the character designs are really cool. The world building is good. I didn't get that deep into the story, so I'm not like super sure about how the story is, but I'm sure it's good too. The bosses, I fought a boss while I was playing it, and the boss was so cool, and a lot of the enemies are really cool. So yeah, I love this game. I'm definitely gonna play more of it. This is one of my favorites that I got from the trip. It was kind of just one that I was like had on my list, but it wasn't like super, you know, top of mind for getting. But now that I have it, I'm like, wow, this is actually one of the best ones I have. And yeah, I mean, I've described the whole gameplay pretty well to you, so if that sounds good to you, you should definitely play it. I think, like I said, it's one of my favorites I got. So yeah, Baton Kaitos, Eternal Wings, and The Lost Ocean. Super fun, super fun. Love this game. So moving on, leaves us with the Nintendo Switch. I got two games for the Nintendo Switch. The first one here is Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. Shin Megami Tensei is one of those games that I had like heard the name of maybe a year or two ago. I had heard the name Shin Megami Tensei, and I've seen it in stores and stuff, and it popped up, but it was, you know, just one of those games with like a weird sounding Japanese name that I like probably wasn't going to be interested in. It looked kind of, you know, not really my thing. But recently I kind of heard a description of it being a lot like Pokemon, but like more adult themed. and I was like, ooh, well, I really like Pokemon, so let me try it out. So I got Shin Megami Tensei 3 on my computer, and I absolutely love this game. So here I got it on Switch as well, which honestly is probably a better format. This is a remaster of a game for the PS2, so some of the cutscenes and things like that are like really low res, and honestly on like a 1440 computer display PC, it does get a little bit funky looking, going from like cutscene to gameplay, and then the way the resolution shifts and things like that. It's a little funky. It's definitely a lot more, it just works better on Switch, you know what I mean? That's the only way I can describe that, but it just seems to fit a little bit better on Switch, and the graphics aren't anything to write home about, so it's, you know, it's definitely feels more at home on the Switch to me. It's something I'd rather play on the Switch than on my computer. The game is really just adult Pokemon, and that is simplifying it a bit, but it's like the best way to relate it to people who don't really know about it already, in my opinion, is to call it like adult Pokemon. There's like very cult-like themes. There's like, you're dealing with like a cult-like organization that basically brings the end of the world, and then demons start to roam the earth after that happens. I think they call it the Rapture or something. And the whole earth, I don't know if you haven't seen Inception, it's basically that part of Inception where you look up and you see the buildings above you, and you see like the earth wrapping. So because the earth like completely wraps into a ball like around itself, and so when you look upwards you can see like all the buildings, and like everything curves the opposite direction, if you will. But yeah, it's got very adult themes, and I'm not saying like pornographic or anything like that, but it's, you know, dealing with the occult. It's kind of gory, kind of like darker themes, things like that. And instead of Pokemon, you're like collecting demons, and you get like demonic power and things like that. It's a really cool game. It's really fun. It's just a really good way to enjoy that Pokemon genre of games for someone who, you know, because Pokemon is made for children, and, you know, I still like Pokemon. I'll still play it from time to time, especially Poke MMO, things like that. But this is just, just another version of that type of game that is very solid, very good. And Shin Megami Tensei 5 is actually coming out very soon here, next month. So I'm really excited for that. Yeah, I mean, definitely check this out if you're into Pokemon and you're older now or an adult. It's just, it's done very well. It's very fun. The themes are really cool. The demons that you can collect and fight are really, really cool. And it's, yeah, just a really good time. The next game and the last game I bought for Switch, and this will actually finish out everything I got for the Nintendo consoles, is Cuphead for the Switch. You know, obviously I'd heard of Cuphead. It was really popular back in like 2017. I wanted to get it on PC at a certain point. I never bought it though. Then I heard that they were planning on making a physical copy of Cuphead for the Nintendo Switch. And I was like, oh, Cuphead on Switch, that's like perfect. Like, I feel like those two things go together so well, and I don't really like buying digital games as much, so I was like really holding out for the physical release. The cool part about this physical release too is that there's actually like little Cuphead like comic strips inside the case, where the manual would usually go. They're called Cuphead funnies, and they're like little funny little comic strips. It's just goofy stuff like that. And Cuphead is basically just a side-scroller shooter, like a 1920s aesthetic, like cartoon aesthetic, I should say. Kind of like old school Mickey Mouse or things like that. Yeah, it's very challenging game. The bosses are, it's got that kind of like, maybe like a game like Altered Beast or some of those old school side-scroller games from, you know, the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo era. Kind of reminds me of those, but it's like modern, and it's got a really, really good like 1920s art style, really good music, really interesting boss concepts, really fun enemy designs, and just a really smooth control scheme. Like, it's just a really, really good game. I love this game. Very fun. And going back to what I was talking about with the physical copy, I kept checking on like when they were going to release this physical copy, and I just kept like, I got the original articles saying they're planning on releasing a physical copy, and then anytime I would look it up after that, I would get those same articles, but nothing new. And so I had checked on it pretty regularly for about a year without any new news coming out, and I was like, oh, maybe they just gave up on it, maybe, you know, whatever. And then I kind of forgot about it, and it's, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years since then, something like that. And I go to MGC and they have a copy of physical Cuphead sitting there, And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it is out. That's really cool. And I bought it. So this was definitely like a really big surprise for me. I'm really happy that I got it. It was really exciting to see it there. Yeah, I feel like everybody's heard of Cuphead though, to be honest. That it's a really good game, and I think it fits really good on the Nintendo Switch. So the next thing I'm gonna go with is I'll get my 2 PC games out of the way. How about that? I'll just get into them. The first game I got is The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. I'm obviously a big Morrowind fan. I love that game. I've played it on multiple consoles. Well, actually, it's just on Xbox. So I played it on Xbox and PC a bunch, and I've played a lot of that game. It's my favorite Elder Scrolls game, and it's really fun. And I saw that they were selling it as a PC DVD-ROM, so I was like, okay, it's the Game of the Year edition, so it comes with all the DLCs. It's definitely meant for a Windows XP computer. The system requirements actually say that, it's recommended for Windows 98, Windows ME, or Windows XP/2000. It's not meant for modern computers, and when I installed it on my computer, the display settings are really messed up. It doesn't allow a widescreen resolution. It is 1:1 ratio only. So my recording's a little weird. The OBS recorded it and kind of shoved it into to the left side. So there's like this big black bar on the right. It's definitely not made for modern computers. If you want to play Morrowind on a modern computer, get it on Steam for sure. It's Morrowind. It's an Elder Scrolls game. If everybody's heard of Skyrim, it's like that, but better. I would say Skyrim does better first-person shooter mechanics, and that's why playing that game with a bow and arrow is like the default and the most fun, because the game really is set up more like a first-person shooter. And I'm not trying to rip on Skyrim. That game is really good, but it's better suited for action and better suited for first-person shooter combat. Morrowind has a bigger emphasis on the RPG mechanics and does the RPG mechanics significantly better than Skyrim. I think most people can agree on that, to be honest, but some people prefer more action-oriented gameplay over more strategic stats-based gameplay, and that's perfectly understandable. So that's kind of where the divide becomes between which Elder Scrolls is the best game. Is it Morrowind or Skyrim? But yeah, I fall a little bit more on the Morrowind side, and I love this game. I want to get it on an Windows XP era computer. That'd be really cool to be able to kind of play it the way people used to play it back in the day. I already have it on Xbox though, so it's not something that I care about too much. But yeah, Morrowind. The next PC game I got is Black and White 2. This is a game that my friend had talked to me about a lot. Yeah, he was trying to find this game, and he didn't want to buy it at that vendor, so I bought it. But this game is in perfect condition. They really did a good job preserving this piece of history here. And Black and White 2 is a god game. I could not get it to run on my computer. I'm realizing now that I said earlier that Populous was my least played game out of these, but I just remembered I literally cannot play Black and White 2 on my computer. It will not install. I will at some point, probably, like I said, try to download it on like a Windows XP computer and play it that way, and that'll be kind of cool. But it looks like you kind of run armies, and there's like mythical creatures and monsters and stuff, and it looks really fun. I want to play it, but no way to do that as of yet, unless I want to to spend another 4 hours trying to get it downloaded on my computer. And then even once I get that done, who knows if it even runs at all, considering how old it is. There might be some compatibility issues. Let me know, what do you guys think of Black and White 2 if you've played it before? I didn't get to play it, so I guess I'm not sure. But moving on, let's do PlayStation next. Let's do PlayStation. I didn't get any games for PlayStation 3, 4, or 5. All the games I got were PlayStation 1 or 2. Just a heads up. But starting with PlayStation 1, let's start with the game Final Fantasy Tactics. This game, it's a tactics game in the Final Fantasy sort of universe. I've heard a few people actually talk about it. Happy Console Gamer, I saw a streamer that I watch sometimes say that it's one of the best games ever. Yeah, it seems like it's a good blend of, simple enough gameplay, but there's also a lot of complexity. You can climb on roofs and trees and hills and stuff. You can send your little characters or pips onto them, so then there's elevation bonuses, and there's this whole revive system. Our characters have 3 turns to get revived, and you need certain items from other characters in order to revive them. There's obviously some characters are better at healing, some are better at damage, some are better at defense. Yeah, there's a lot of good strategy to be had. It is simplistic. It reminds me of the game Symphony of War, but with a lot more emphasis on the the tactical aspect of it. There's more tactics, if that makes sense. Like when you're just positioning your characters and deciding who's going to go where and what elevation are they going to be at, and deciding these types of things. It's very, very, very focused on those types of like battlefield tactics. You know, for me personally, I am a bigger fan of like strategy games. I like to be able to, you know, build up and prepare for things a bit more, and this game seems a lot more focused on, you know, you have what you have, and the tactical aspect is really what's emphasized. That's a lot more of where the complication in this game is, and that is not super my style. I do like a bit more, you know, strategy in my games, but you know, I had a lot of fun playing this. The enemies are cool, the art style is really cool. I love the old PS1 era graphics. I'm a big fan of the way they look. Final Fantasy universe is cool. I like Final Fantasy games, so yeah, Final Fantasy Tactics. The next game I have here is Xenogears. Now, Xenogears was a recommendation from Happy Console Gamer as well, that I watched on his channel. He called it his favorite game on the PS1, and honestly, my PS1 collection is pretty small. I only have a handful of games for it, so I definitely wanted to beef it up, and I'm like, well, I typically trust that guy's opinion. I do like a lot of the games that he likes, so I was like, oh, I mean, if he likes Xenogears, then I'd like it. I'll probably like it too. He described it as having like religious connotations and having very deep themes and a very deep story and a lot of lore behind it, and I'm like, oh, that seems like something I'd love to delve into. So Xenogears, it's along the same vein of like Gundam or, you know, Neon Genesis Evangelion, like that type of mech genre. So that seemed kind of interesting, but you know, as soon as I start the game, like, you know, I'm like super interested in talking to all the characters. They all have interesting things to say. There's like a marriage happening, and then the younger brother of the bride wants like you to marry the bride instead, and yeah, the story was just really cute to begin with. It had a lot of interesting things, and what you want out of the story is what you get out of the story. Like, you can go around and talk to everybody and figure out all the lore, and that was really fun for me. And I'm not someone who plays games for storyline a lot of the time, but you know, I'm more interested in gameplay over, you know, like a narrative. The way I see it, like, you know, if I'm more interested in like the narrative of something, then I'd rather like watch a TV show about it or something like that, you know, rather than watching a TV show with some interaction tacked onto it, which I feel like a lot of games are kind of like that. So I definitely appreciate it when games are more focused on the gameplay and kind of just let you discover the lore and the story as you see fit. I definitely like when games do that. Yeah, Xenogears is kind of like that. I mean, there is obviously a lot of forced like story progression stuff because it is a JRPG. A lot of the lore you can get from talking to characters. Yeah, the art style is really good. I'm curious to get into this game more. I do want to play it a lot more, but it is definitely an old school JRPG, so there are things that I don't super like, you know, random encounters and things like that. Oh man, random encounters. Like, really, I was playing the game, I was having a lot of fun, and I'm obviously going to play more of it, and I do want to play more of it, and it's a fun game overall. I'm not trying to talk crap about it, but I definitely, when I got into the open world and I started getting like random encounters, and I just, you know, wanted to figure out how to get to the place I was going, but I kept, you know, getting stopped by random encounters, that was pretty frustrating, and it's going to be something that I'm going to have to like get used to and kind of power through. It's not a cheap game for sure. It's actually quite expensive nowadays, but if you're looking for a very deep JRPG story with a lot of lore and a lot of very deep, interesting story elements and stuff like that you can just delve into for a long time, like, this is seems like a great game. The packaging's also really cool. 2 discs, you know, manual, all that. So yeah, Xenogears. And then the last game I got on PlayStation 1 is Kingsfield 2. Kingsfield 2, I already have Kingsfield 1. This is a FromSoft game. They make the Dark Souls games and Elden Ring and all that. It's kind of Dark Souls before Dark Souls. Well, Dark Souls before Dark Souls is Demon Souls, so it's Demon Souls before Demon Souls. It's like, yeah, their first sort of medieval RPG dark fantasy thing that they made. I will say the controls leave something to be desired. It is somewhat difficult to control your character, and it is kind of slow, but the enemies are really interesting. The sort of Metroidvania mechanics, FromSoft does it very well, are very good. There's lots of hidden items and fun things to explore and collect. It's just a fun time. You get a very similar experience that you get to something like Dark Souls, but it's older, first person, of course, and obviously there are significant differences. It's not just another Dark Souls game. It is its own series entirely, and if you are interested in playing a game that is like Kingsfield but more modern, I would actually recommend the game Lunacid. It's on Steam. It's very, very good. It's the Kingsfield formula, but updated with modern graphics, modern controls. Yeah, it's modern Kingsfield. It would be cool to see FromSoft do another Kingsfield game at some point, but they probably won't ever. I guess we'll see though. The combat system is different than Dark Souls 2. Like, it's more about kiting and like backing up and having high speeds that you can get out of the way of an attack by walking backwards or to the side and then going back in for your attack. Taking damage is as consequential as taking damage in a Dark Souls game. You don't want to take any damage. You want to try to avoid all hits possible. A lot of other games, like, you just kind of take the hits and then you regain health and you go from there. But with Kingsfield, you have limited healing. You have to find items around the map that heal you. You don't heal any other way, so you really don't want to take damage. There's lots of cool magic, lots of cool weapons, lots of cool armor. It really does feel like Dark Souls for the PS1. It hits all the boxes, you know, the cool customization, all the different options you have for character building, all the exploration, the Metroidvania mechanics, and the combat system, all the cool enemies, and the dark fantasy setting. Yeah, Dark Souls before Dark Souls. It's cool. I really like that this game was also bought from a collector, they mentioned when I bought it, and so as a result of that, the game is in phenomenal condition. It looks brand new. Like, it looks like I just bought it yesterday, new, sealed. So Kingsfield 2. Here we're going on to the PlayStation 2 games that I got, and the first one is the game Giants Citizen Kabuto. In this game, you know, I had never heard of it. Giant Citizen Kabuto is a third-person shooter, and it's really fun. It's like in a, I don't know if you'd call it an open world, but it definitely feels like an open world, and the creatures are really interesting, and it's very comedic. Like, the cutscenes are pretty funny. I actually had a really good time playing this, considering it's a game like that I had never heard of before, and it's pretty underground. It's also on Steam too, interestingly enough. It's surprisingly good, especially considering, just like I said, it's a game that I had never heard of. But yeah, good third-person shooter. Doesn't really remind me of anything in particular. It's kind of its own thing. You play in like kind of a mech suit type thing, and there's all these weird little creatures, and the world is very unique and interesting. You're definitely gonna see things that you've never seen before with this one, so I would check it out if it seems interesting to you. And then the last game for any PlayStation device, for PlayStation 2 specifically, is the game Orphan Scion of Sorcery. And this is based on like an old anime series that I hadn't heard of either. It just looked kind of cool. It's kind of the same thing as the last one. I didn't know what it was. It's a pretty good JRPG, and the enemies are really interesting and fun to look at, and the abilities are fun. And I just really like games where like the enemies are unique and interesting. They kind of make you think. And yeah, I like things that are more fantasy and not like stereotypical fantasy. Like, I like seeing something new that I've never seen before, and these two PS2 games really do that for me. Like, this Orphan game, I'm pretty sure I fought one or two bosses while I was playing it, and both of them were super unique and interesting and pretty fun to fight. So moving on to the next console company, yeah, Sega. So I don't have a Master System, so that means that the first console would be Genesis, and I didn't buy anything for the Genesis, so the first thing would be for the Sega Saturn. And for the Saturn, I bought one very important game, and that would be Panzer Dragoon Zwei, or Zwei? Panzer Dragoon 2. Now, I am a huge fan of the Panzer Dragoon series. Really like it. It's an on-rails shooter. Kind of has the same thing that I was talking about with the PlayStation 2 games that I was talking about earlier, where there's very unique enemies. It's set in a very unique world that is definitely not stereotypical fantasy. Lots of unique creatures that you won't see anywhere else. Yeah, and I think this game is a significant improvement on the first Panzer Dragoon game. Yeah, it's got better graphics, the level variety, there's more level variety, there's more enemies. It's just the first Panzer Dragoon game, but a little bit better in my opinion. So highly recommend Panzer Dragoon Zwei. Zwei? I don't know. It's pronounced Zwei in German, but I don't know like if you're meant to say Zwei or not. I know people say like with the Zweihander, like the sword, people say Zweihander, even though it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? I don't. Do you pronounce things as they're meant to be pronounced in the native language, or do you do an Americanized pronunciation? It's a debate as old as time itself. Yeah, Panzer Dragoon 2. I don't really know what else to say about it. It's on-rails shooter where you're on a dragon. Got a cool, unique, interesting world design, lore, and story. And the bosses are fun, and so are all the enemies. And yeah, Panzer Dragoon, one of my favorite series of all time. And that's all I got on the Saturn, unfortunately. So moving on to the Sega Dreamcast. Starting off, let's start with Power Stone. So Power Stone is a 3D fighting game. It's kind of like, you know, Super Smash Bros, Street Fighter, or one of those. More like Super Smash Bros in my opinion than anything else, but it's 3D, so it's in a fully 3D space, but there's like items around the room you can pick up. There's like power-ups and items you can grab to give you an advantage. It's a really good fighting game. Power Stone 2 is also a thing, and it just has more stuff, but it's also more expensive. So I just got the first one. Eventually I want to get the second one. I've been looking for a game like this on Steam for a long time. The closest thing I've been able to find is Gang Beasts, but it doesn't quite hit the mark. Like, I'm looking for a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate type game that is in 3D, just like Power Stone. Or maybe I'll just say a Power Stone-like game, but on Steam, like one that I can play with friends on the computer. Power Stone also has this kind of like Age of Exploration vibe that I really like the sort of like 1400s to 1800s style, kind of like Europa Universalis, that game, which I'm a big fan of. So kind of a cool theme, really fun game in general. So if you have any recommendations for a game that's like Power Stone but on Steam, please let me know. I've been looking all over for one. I even asked ChatGPT to give me some game suggestions and didn't really turn up with anything that I thought looked quite as good. But yeah, if you have anything that's like a 3D Smash Bros. Ultimate, you know, Power Stone type game on Steam, yeah, please let me know in the comments. I've been looking all over for one like that. Anyway, next on the list is Jet Grind Radio. So this is also known as Jet Set Radio when it was released on the Xbox. I think it's on other platforms too, maybe Steam, maybe PC, I don't know. Jet Grind Radio is a very unique and interesting game that I really like. It's got all the good parts of like a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater type game where you're on rollerblades instead of a skateboard, but it's kind of the same deal where you're like kind of grinding and, you know, skating around, and it's a good time. But on top of that, it also kind of reminds me of like Grand Theft Auto, because your goal is to spray paint stuff around the map. There's another game like that on Steam called Sludge Life. Highly recommend that game, but honestly, Jet Grind Radio is better than Sludge Life. But yeah, it's like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, so you got all the grinding and all the, you know, going around real fast around the city and having fun that way, but you're also trying to spray paint a bunch of stuff too. And you're trying to get to like interesting places to spray paint. And then on top of that, you also have cops coming after you that chase after you. That gets more intense the more time you spend spray painting in the level. And it's kind of like GTA in that way, where you're trying to like get the spray painting done before the cops get so intense that it becomes like really difficult to spray paint. And then when you do go spray paint stuff, you have to like move your analog stick in a specific way in order to get it spray painted. So it's not just as easy as going up and pressing a button. You have to kind of like do a couple other things to spray paint it while there's cops on you. It's a really good game. You can also grab onto cars and like kind of have them give you momentum so you can go really fast. And you also have to pick up spray bottles as well. Like, you don't just have unlimited spray paints. You have to like go and get them, and a lot of those you get by going to hard to get spots that you have to like do tricks and stuff to get to. So yeah, you're doing all this while you're trying to prevent the cops from getting out of hand and losing to them. So it's just a really fast-paced, really fun, really intense game, and it's really, really fun. I absolutely love this game. I had a ton of fun with it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I was like, it doesn't seem like the type of game for me. I've never been like a super big fan of like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater type games, so I was like, I don't know, but it's that plus a lot more, and I love it. It's super fun. The next game we're gonna go with is Sonic Adventure. Let's address the elephant in the room. I know that these two Dreamcast games, Sonic Adventure and Jet Grind Radio, are not in good condition. I got them at a severe discount. They're usually worth about $100. I got both of them for like $25 and $35, and that's just because of the condition that they're in. I don't think these are like the original cases or anything like that either. My Sonic Adventure game doesn't even close. Like, it's not great, but I honestly just wanted the games to play, so I'm not really too concerned about the condition. Maybe at some points I'll get like an updated case or whatever, but for now I'm happy with what I have. It's not the first 3D Sonic game, but the first 3D Sonic game, Sonic 3D Blast, was not very good. And so really this is kind of like Sonic's Super Mario 64. This is to the Sonic franchise what Super Mario 64 was to the Mario franchise. And it's Sonic, but put into 3D for the first time, like positively, I guess. Unfortunately, Sega kind of missed the mark with the Sega Saturn. They didn't really release Sonic games for it at all, which is really weird, but they ended up kind of skipping a generation. So there was a bunch of Sonic games on the Genesis, they skipped the Saturn, and then they released Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which were fantastic games on the Dreamcast. Like I said, it's Sonic's first big leap into 3D, and there's like adventure stages where you're exploring around and looking for items, and then there's action stages where you're like going real fast and doing all the loops and stuff. There's not a lot to say about the Sonic games. It's just, you know, gotta go fast. It's everything moving by you real quick, and boy, this game is very fast. It's really impressive how Sega is able to make consoles that keep up with the speed of Sonic. It was really impressive with the Genesis. Seeing the screen go that fast is just kind of unheard of. Like, you know, the Super Nintendo didn't do that. Sega does what Nintendo don't and all that. Yeah, seeing like a fully 3D environment, and the game doesn't look bad. Like, the graphics are quite good, and yet you're just like zooming, kind of like I was talking about earlier in the video. F-Zero GX, it's kind of like that in its speed, and I really like that about it, and it's pretty fun. You know, I'm not the biggest Sonic fan out there, I never have been, but this game is probably my favorite Sonic game. I grew up playing Sonic Unleashed, and it reminds me quite a bit of that. But better, of course, I'd say. Yeah, Sonic Adventure. It's kind of been on my list for a long time. It's a classic, and I feel like if you have a Dreamcast or you're collecting for the Dreamcast, you kind of have to have it. Surprisingly fun for a non-Sonic fan. All right, and last but not least, for the Sega Dreamcast, we have Shenmue. Oh boy. Now, Shenmue is the first AAA game. What that really means is that you have, you know, an art director, and then that art director has a team of artists below them that do all the artwork. And then you have a sound director, and there's like a whole team under that sound director. So you have like a bunch of teams that are all doing separate things, working together, you know, hundreds of employees. We're talking massive, like, movie-sized budget. Like, this is what we're talking about with AAA games. And this was the first ever AAA game, really. It comes at a time, I'm gonna nerd out over Shenmue right now, because this was the last time that game companies really cared about their packaging. The convergence of the first AAA game plus a time when the developers cared about their packaging leads to one of the most beautiful looking video game cases, display-wise, I've ever seen. And this is not like a deluxe edition or anything like that. This is just Shenmue. I'm gonna take it apart and look at each individual segment in the video, but it comes apart into like 6 different segments. And there's, you know, a soundtrack, there's like a passport thing where you can register online. There is just the straight up Shenmue movie, and then there's also all 3 discs that the game requires, because this game is just massive. The artwork in here is beautiful. It's a really high quality case, and I love the way this whole thing is put together. Aesthetically, it reminds me of the early 2000s, and you can really tell that it's a AAA game just based on the quality of the packaging alone, which is really impressive. But what is Shenmue? So Shenmue is an RPG where your father, oh gosh, I literally played through the beginning. Your father goes fully missing, I'm pretty sure. Or does he die? One of the two. And you're tasked with finding the people who perpetrated it. It's set in 80s Japan. There's an emphasis on fist fighting, which is kind of interesting. There aren't really any weapons that I know of. It's focused mainly on graphics and storytelling, and I really like it. There's also a Shenmue movie. I'm curious about the Shenmue movie. I don't really know what that entails. Is it just all the cutscenes? I don't know. Yeah, really story-driven game. Lots of time, lots of effort, lots of money put into it. Everything behind it is beautiful, and yeah, Shenmue. So that does it for the Sega. However, I have one more game in store, and it is for the original Xbox. I didn't get anything else for any Xbox systems. This is it. The very last game. And it's Shenmue 2. This is a direct sequel to the original Shenmue, and it takes place in Hong Kong. Shenmue 2 also comes with a copy of Shenmue the movie, but it's not like the second one, it's the first one, which is kind of interesting. But I don't know a ton about Shenmue 2, to be honest. I know that it takes place in Hong Kong, and it's directly after the first one, but I thought might as well get Shenmue 2 since I have Shenmue 1, and I'll continue the story. I'll get the sequel. That is going to conclude the video. That's what I got at MGC. I'm, obviously going to go next year and try to save money for that and just buy a ton of really cool games again. But yeah, let me know what your favorite games that I showed off today are. Let me know what games you're playing, what you've got recently, and thanks for watching, and bye-bye.